Okay, Michael Landis with Forsyth Technical Community College. Yesterday I had a battery that was very weak in my minivan. It had just happened overnight. I did a video on that, on checking the connections to it. The voltage was really low on it, on the battery. It was I think just right about 10.5, 11 volts when I went out to the car first thing in the morning, and so we checked the connections, all that, to make sure they were good, and then I charged the battery overnight. You cannot test a discharged battery. We've gone over that several times. Battery must be charged in order to test it, and it does take a while to test it. 12.6 volt automotive battery with 6 volts in it is considered fully discharged. So I charged it up overnight until my charger said that it was fully charged, and we'll see what happens with it today. I've got the battery sitting here. It is outside of the vehicle. As you can see, let me see if I can get my camera adjusted here well so that you can see it. So there sits my battery, and I have one of my favorite voltmeters, the Fluke 111. It's not an expensive meter, but it does a great job. It's very accurate, works well, and so it's one of my go-to meters. So I'm going to take it, hook it across the battery terminals, and as you can see, it did charge up overnight. I've got 12.82 volts, which is meaning there's a surface charge there. You can't get more than 12.6 out of this particular type of battery. So there's a surface charge in this battery, and normally you will have to get rid of that. I don't think that's going to matter a whole lot. But so we're done with the voltmeter for now. We're going to disconnect it. And my load tester that I have here is a Mac Tools load tester. It is a carbon pile, so this is a capacity tester, not a capacitance tester. There is a capacitance type tester that does not put an actual load on the battery. This tool has good sized cables on it, because they will carry a load. They are going to carry a lot of voltage through them, or amperage rather, so they're good sized cables. And I'm going to hook it up to the battery, and we are showing 12.7 volts. My Fluke was showing 12.8, so a tenth of a volt difference. Now this particular battery, I'll look at the top of it here, and it says it has a cranking amp rating of 750, but it has a cold cranking amp rating of 600. Cold cranking amps is the easiest number to use to figure out how to test this, because it's very simple. Half of the cold cranking amps. So we're going to put a 300 amp draw on it. This scale, if you can, I'll see if I can zoom in just a little bit closer to it so you can see it. You've seen the battery, you know what it looks like. So let's see what the tester shows. And down just a little bit. There we go. So 12.7, 12.8 volts, somewhere in that range. This one's reading 0 because our carbon pile is turned all the way off like it should be. This knob is loose. Do not tighten down on it. When you turn it off, just turn it till it stops. Don't tighten down on it. You'll break stuff with these testers. This one I've had for 25 plus years, probably closer to 30 years. So it's about 30 years old, still does a good job. Now what I expect to see with a good battery is that when I put a load on this, what I expect to see is that it's going to come up to 300 amps, because we have 600 cold cranking amp battery. We're going to load test it at half of the cold cranking amps, not the cranking amps. So I'm going to turn this dial till this comes up to about 600, and what should happen is I should be allowed to let it sit there for about 15 seconds, somewhere in that neighborhood. On this scale you can see there's some green, there's some red. So today it's in the mid 60s out here, not real warm, but it's 70 degrees Fahrenheit. While I have that 300 amp load pulled on this battery, after 15 seconds I should still be reading about 9.6 volts. So it should be able to hold that load for about 15 seconds. If it doesn't, then either the battery is discharged and it's not fully charged up, or the battery itself is bad. So we're going to take a look at this guy and see what happens. I'm going to start turning the dial, and you'll see this start coming up as I start getting a load on it. And so what's happening here is I can't even get, I've got good connections, I can't even get up to a 600 amp load. I only made it to a little less than 250, and if I go up to 225, you can see my voltage is already down to 6.5 volts. So that's what I was expecting to see out of this battery. The problem that I had with it in the car is I noticed a day or so ago it was not charging. The battery was weak. It did not want to start the vehicle up, and so I suspected I had a bad battery, and I decided I would check it. Well, by the time that I got to it to check it, the battery was discharged enough it wouldn't crank the car over. I noticed it one morning, just the cranking speed did not sound right. So I told my wife I need to check that, and I'll check it first thing in the morning. I did, and the car wouldn't crank over. It had just enough voltage. It would do what I call ratcheting the starter, where the starter's just clicking really, really fast. So this battery is not going to survive. I've already gotten another battery for it. I had a good clue that was going to be the result, so I didn't play around with it. I just went ahead and bought a new battery for it yesterday. It's in the car and running, but I went ahead and charged this battery so we could test it, so you could see what happens with it. This is generally what I notice with bad batteries. When a battery has actually reached the end of its useful life, I usually don't have to hold that load on it for 15 seconds. I know it before we get there. Usually as soon as I start putting the load on it, either I can't reach the correct amount of load, or as soon as I get there, the voltage starts falling off fairly quick. I usually never have to reach the 15-second mark, but that's the procedure. Hold that load for 15 seconds and then read the voltage. Well, if you can't get to that correct amperage load, then the battery's bad. The only other thing that you may want to check, a good indicator that you had a charged battery to begin with, is let the battery sit after load testing it about 5 minutes, recheck the voltage, and see where it ends up being. This has only been about a minute or so since we started this, so let's see, since we tested it, let's see what it looks like. And on here, what you can see is we are already up to 12.3, 12.4 volts. So to me that means we had a fairly charged up battery. I'll just use the same voltmeter. Let me get it hooked up here for you. And balancing a tripod, camera in one hand and working with the other. And you can see, according to our flute meter, we started out at 12.8. We're back up to just about 12.6, 12.55. I'll round that off to 12.6. And pretty much that tells me I got a bad battery, because I know to begin with the 12.8 was a surface load. Generally on a lot of testers, they'll tell you after you charge the battery, if you have over 12.6 volts, turn the headlights on for 5 seconds, then turn them back off. That would require the battery being in the car. This one's out of the car. I could have just put a small load, maybe a 50 amp load on the battery for 2 or 3 seconds, and it would have gotten rid of that surface charge. But we're at 12.6. I can only pull approximately 250, 225 amps out of this battery. I should have been able to pull 300, and when I was at that 225 mark on there, what our voltage itself was already down to 6.5 volts. So this is a bad battery, needed to be replaced. This one's going to head back to the recycler. It's run its useful life. Time to recycle it and get a new one. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Land us out.